Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. So first and foremost, I want to say to you, it's never been as easy to build websites as it is today with the new WordPress block editor and the site editor and the full site editing experience. So if you do one thing today, please share this video to show other folks how easy it is to build a website with WordPress. Now, I recently did a full site speed build challenge, which was fun to do, but it's quite fast paced. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more slow paced and methodical, and because the speed build challenge is quite fast paced, you don't understand why a developer or a site builder might do something or make certain decisions. So I wanted to do something that was similar but more educational and more methodical, so that I could actually describe the reasons why I might do something and what blocks I might use to build a website. So I've used a website called A Million Screenshots to find a random site. I thought, well, I'll build it. So I found this site here called bookup.com, and it's some kind of social media scraper that will scrape your site and turn your timeline into a book, basically. So this I thought was quite an interesting site because we've got this kind of like cover image, which is like a standard thing. It's got an interesting navigation. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of building this. What I might do is actually come back to this video and build something with code, but the premise of this video is to just show you how easy it is to build a complex website. So if we look at this site here, this layout, we've got a standard kind of hero image, I guess you would call it, with a call to action. And then we've got this interesting layout where we've got what I would say is two columns, but we've got this breakout, which is an interesting sort of element of design. But we've also got this kind of staggered look, which is quite interesting. Although it's a two-column block, it's broken up in such a way that your eye is kind of drawn around the page. And I thought, well, how can I build this in the block editor? So I'll give myself a challenge, and I'm going to show you how to replicate this site just using the block editor. Now, I'm not going to build the whole thing, but I'm going to pick out interesting elements. So this two-column layout is interesting, so I'm going to build that out. And then I'm going to probably build this call to action and then maybe the footer. So how are we going to do this? Well, I've got a little add-on to Firefox here that allows me to annotate this up. So I'm going to take a screenshot of the whole page, and then I'm going to break it up and show you, describe what I'm going to do and how I'm going to build this. So the first element here is, I guess, is a call to action. Now that's just going to be a simple group with some centered text, a paragraph block. So that's going to be fairly simple to do. The next element is going to be this element here, which is, I would say that's a cover image. And then we've got in that cover image, we're going to have I guess is going to be a row. Now, the reason I would choose a row is because with a row, which uses Flexbox, you can align elements within the row to space them evenly. So this will be a row block. And then within that row block, we're going to have another block, which is going to be the navigation block. And because the overall row block is going to be aligned with elements spaced evenly, any block I put inside of this row block is going to be, spaced out evenly. So this will be a navigation block, this will be a logo block, which will be an image, and then we've got this kind of like icon navigation. And these three blocks will just align themselves perfectly like that in a row block. And then for the text, I'm going to probably put in a group block there, and the group block will be aligned with content width, which is a setting that you can set with a group block. And then we'll probably use a stack block in that group block, and then we can use that to align any inner blocks to align them to the bottom. And then this will just be another group block, maybe with paragraph heading and some buttons. So that's going to be fairly easy to do. Now, where it gets interesting is this content block. So the way I would see this being built is this is going to be a columns block, and that's going to be the kind of like grouping of everything. And actually what I might do is put that in as a group initially. So there may be a group there, because I like to just group things. Who doesn't know? And then inside that, I'm going to put in a columns block, and that's just going to fill that whole area. That's going to go down to the bottom of the page. This will continue to sort of expand as we add columns. So in the columns block, we're going to add in two columns initially. So this will be the first column, and then we'll add the second column, which will be here. And then within this column block, to get this breakout layout, what I'm going to have to do, I think, is to add in another columns block. And then within that columns block, we'll add two columns. Now, if this doesn't make sense yet, it will do as I get into it. Trust me. So we'll have 2 columns in there, and this will literally be, one column will be empty, and this will allow me to break this layout out. So with that columns block selected, I'm going to use probably negative margins, and that will push this both of these columns up and allow me to create this breakout effect that breaks the cover block above. And then within that columns, this image here will be a cover image, and this will be standard. We'll probably duplicate this. But if we just come over to this block here, so this cover block here will be the same as this one here. We'll put in an image, and then within that within that group cover block, we'll add in another group block which will maybe align it with a stack so we can align it to the bottom. But actually, if it's a cover block, we can align all the elements to the bottom anyway. So this will be a group, and then we'll have standard paragraph, buttons, maybe a heading, buttons, and this other text. So this whole cover block here, we'll be able to duplicate that, maybe create a pattern, and then we can just drop them in into building this whole 2-column layout. So that's how I'm going to build this. Now, if we come down to this call to action, again, this is going to be a fairly, this might be tricky to do, but it won't be if you know what you're doing. So I would say this is going to be a group block. Then I would probably put in a cover block. And by putting in a cover block, that will allow me to create this 2-tone effect. I'll be able to put in an image block here. So if I put in a cover block there, what it will allow me to do is to create a gradient, and then I can butt 2 colors up together. So you can put multiple colors in a gradient. So I'll have the first color will be white, or maybe a transparent color, and then we'll have black, then we'll have another black color key point, and then we'll go to white. And we'll use a slider to bring these 2 colors together to create this hard edge. And then what I'll do in that cover block is to add an image. And this is how we'll create this breakout effect. So the image will be placed within the group or within the cover block that's got this kind of 2-tone effect. And the image will look like it breaks out of this kind of black panel. And then simply we'll just add in another, maybe a text block and then some icons. So this should be fairly, although it looks pretty complex, it should be easy to build. So I first of all need to go and get all of the assets for this site. So I'm going to roll a prelude and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've set up the site. This is a standard 2024 theme, which I've added all of the assets from the bookup site. So I've got various images that I can use and some icons, very much as I would have done with a speed build. All the assets are provided for you. So let's dive into this and see how we're going to build this. So the first thing I want to do is to go into my front page, which is actually by default it's called blog home. And we want to first of all build this header. So that's going to be fairly simple to do initially, he says. So we're going to use a group. I'm just going to get rid of that, just start fresh. So in here, I'm going to add in a group. It's going to be 1 column, and I'm going to set that group to black. So I go to my settings and then come to the background color, set that to black. And then inside this group, I just want to add in a paragraph of text. I'm going to go to back to the site and just copy that text out. And that text is going to be white and it's going to be centered. So in the group here, now I like to use groups because once I have a parent group, I can then control all the padding around anything that's within that group, which is kind of like essential when it comes to mobile. Because if we look at mobile here, within our group, if this group was not aligned with inner blocks uses content width, you can see that the text goes right to the edge. But because if we wanted to do that, we can then select the group and then just add some padding around that group. And then we've kind of like addressed the mobile issue. That text basically doesn't butt right up to the edge of the screen or the device view. So that's the reason why I like to use groups as parent blocks. So I'm going to put some padding around the top, bottom, left and right, and go back to my desktop view. I think that text is probably a little bit bigger. Not too concerned. It basically just replicates what's in there anyway. I can do a custom size font there, which I will roughly gauge around about there. Then now we're going to get into what do we say we're going to do? We're going to create a cover block and then we're going to use a row. So, okay, so I'm just going to get rid of the existing blocks that come with the theme 2024. And now after my header, I'm going to add in a group block, and then within the group block, I'm going to add a cover block, and this will be my image. So I should have this image right there. And now, as you can see, it doesn't go the full width, and that's because the group block is set with the inner blocks use the content width. Now, the content width is set by the theme itself. If we go to the global styles, we can see that the content width is set to 620. Now, I'm going to increase that to, I don't know, 1080. I'll save that. However, the group in the page here, I don't want to use the inner blocks use content width. By doing that, it will take the alignment right to the edge, which is what I want. Now, another thing you'll notice is that we've got this gap at the top here, and that's because our block spacing has got a 1.2 rem spacing by default, and that comes from the default setting in the theme.json. So I'm going to reduce that to 0, and that will bring everything together. So by setting that and saving that, all of my groups will be butt close or will butt together, and I won't get any spaces. And then I can control what gaps I want on individual blocks. So what do we have? We've got this row block. Now, this here is going to be the row. And if I select the cover block, you've got this alignment or content positioning setting here. So I'm going to align that to the top. Now, do I want to do that? I'm not sure if I do want to do that because we've got top and bottom. So actually what I might do here is leave that in the middle and then group this and group this as change the group to a stack. And then I want to set the stack justification to stretch. Is that right? So that I can align everything top and bottom or space between. I think if I set a minimum height to that, that will push everything to the top and bottom of the cover block. Yeah, perfect. So what I've done there is I've basically created a stack block. Now anything I place inside of here, so if I add another block here, let me say, let's call it a group, add after, that'll be a group. If I just give this a color background so we can see what's going on, we'll see that the top group is aligned to the top and the bottom group is aligned to the bottom. And that's because we've got a stack block here. We've set the vertical alignment to space between. And because we're setting the minimum height, it basically just pushes everything within that to whatever the minimum height is. So it would be pushed to the top and the bottom. So as you can see, we increase or decrease that. That's going to move those elements, but it's going to keep them to the absolute top and bottom. So in this first block here, we'll get rid of that button and I'll take that color off. We don't need that anymore. And this is going to be a row, isn't it? Because then we can then use the alignment, and again, using the space between, because it uses flexbox, we can use the alignment space between items, and this will just push everything evenly across the width. So the first element in that group block is going to be a navigation block. So we just put in a nav block there, and we can go to the settings and we can change that to always use the mobile menu. And the style of that is going to be 3. And we don't have any control over the size of this, not that I can see anyway. That doesn't take any effect because I don't know why that is, but it is what it is. So the color of that needs to be white. And then I'm going to add another block after this block, and this will house the logo. So that can just be an image. Go to my media library, and we have the logo there. And because we've got space in between on our row block there, it's pushing. We only have 2 elements, so they're pushed either side. Now, if we add another block after this image block, we'll see that now it's spaced evenly. So in this block, I'm going to put a group in there, and this will be another row. So we've got a row within a row, but because this row is pushing everything, spacing everything between, we then have a kind of inner block that again will space everything in between. So here we'll have an image, so I should have this book icon here, and then I can duplicate that and duplicate that again. But this time I'll change this icon for another one, which is going to be this user icon, I guess, and then replace that one with bag icon. So we save that, we close all this to get some real estate. We can see now that we're kind of building this header, which is kind of replicating what's up here in this site. I've probably got a bit too much padding on this element here, so I can reduce that a little bit. So I'll go to my settings and then go to the padding, and I've probably got too much top and bottom, so I can take that out, save that. Let's have a look at okay, I'm not going to get too fussed over this, but that kind of looks similar, so that's fine. So now we come to this bottom section here. So if I'm going to keep that block in there, but I'm going to take the color off. Don't need that color. So go to the settings and then take that off, clear that. And the alignment of that inner block, I want to be, what we got here. So if we just copy that out for now, and I'll just paste in the text like that. So actually the alignment works as it is at the moment. So the text, all of that text needs to be white. And then this is actually a button. Now you can just change, you can swap these blocks between themselves. So this was actually inserted or pasted in as a paragraph block, but I can change that to a button block, which is really cool. And the background of that button is going to be red. Now I don't have the color palette from here, but I do have a color palette which comes as default with the 2024 theme. So I'm just going to use these colors for now. So then I have this text should be on its own. And again, this element here should be a button, and it should be, it's just an outline, which we can change the style of that by default. We can change that to an outline, and we set the color of that to white. So that gives us our button with our kind of skeletal button, I guess. Now these fonts need to be sans serif. That's a serif font, and then sans serif. I'm not too concerned about the style of this, so I'm not going to get too critical with this, but in fact I'm going to leave that as it is. This one here, I'm going to use the sans serif font, and I'm going to make that large and maybe bold. We do have an underline because it's a link. We can change that in the global settings. For accessibility, you probably want to leave your links with underlines, but in this instance, I don't want an underline on that. So I'm just going to take the underlines off in my global settings. So now we have, just to finish this off, we've got a little bit of text at the bottom here, which is kind of like, I don't know, I would call it fly shit, but it's just a small element of text, which is going to be white. And so then what I want to do is to just space all these elements out slightly. So I can go to the group block, the parent block, and then come to the settings and then take control of the block spacing. Now we set everything in our global styles to 0. And this is what I meant about taking control of the block spacing per element. So we go to the settings and we go to the block spacing. I can then just add some spacing, and that will just add one spacing element. Depending on what how the theme.json file is set, this may be a scale, or it may be incremental using CSS clamp or min max. But basically it's represented as a unit. So I'm just going to put one unit in there, which will space this out. So if we have a look at the bigger picture, we see what's going on. Now that cover block could probably do with being a lot deeper. So I'm just going to pull that down a little bit. And because we've got the stack set with the minimum height, we then need to adjust that as well. So I'm going to go to, in fact, rather than change the width or the height of the cover block, I'm going to use the stack to define the height. And that will allow me to, by default, will set the width or the height of the cover block. So what I'm going to pick there, I'm going to pick 750 just because of my OCD. I need to have whole numbers or rounded numbers. We can close that off, and we're getting somewhere near what we were after. Now the cover block could do with keep pressing this. I always press the global settings rather than the settings for the block. It's really annoying. So we're going to take the opacity right down because we've got a color overlay on that cover block, and that will just bring the image up 100%. And the image can be moved up slightly. So I'm going to take the image, the cover block settings, and somewhere, where is it? It's in the settings. Is it? Yeah, settings. We've got the focal point for the image. So I want to move that right the way down and that will just push the image up effectively. So that's kind of not far off where, in terms of the layout anyway, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to save that out, just preview this in main browser. So we've got an issue with the logo there, which kind of isn't a problem on that because the image is pushed up a little bit. So we can address that by taking our stack, and we can just reduce the height of that. Again, I keep going to the global styles, it's so annoying. And then we can go to the settings of the stack and change the height, just reduce that a bit, and that will bring the image of the cover block up. I really want to bring that image up. I think I'm at the maximum there, aren't I? So I can't do that. I wonder if I take the stack block and then just reduce that. No. So I do have to take the cover and then reduce the height of the cover. By doing that, we'll keep the image locked to the bottom, or the focal point to the bottom, and push the image up. Can I change the aspect ratio of that image, make it larger inside? Well, yeah, I can. I wonder if I set the height in pixels, 750. Okay, I'm not going to get too hung up on that. I'm going to take the ratio back. I'm going to reset that and set it to the original. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to get too hung up on that. Let's have a look at that. So if I refresh the page, okay, so it does set the stack is actually defining the height. So we're getting closer to where we need to be, I guess. So if I select the stack again, maybe set that to 550 and save that. Go back to the front end, refresh the page. Okay, so maybe a little bit more, maybe 650. Save that, front end, refresh the page. Yeah, it kind of goes over a face, which isn't great, but almost getting to where we want it to be. Maybe I'll take that to 600. Nice round number, I like that. Okay, so that's cool. So the next part is this interesting layout. So what did we say we're going to do? We're going to put in a columns block. So we're going to have 1, 2 columns, and then in the second column, we're going to add another columns block with 2 columns. And that's going to allow us to break out this space. So where do I need to be? I'm going to add in another group block after this one. That'll be a group. And then I'm going to add in, does that by default? No, that changes it to a row. So I want that to be a group. And then in that group, I'm going to add columns. So that's going to be 2 columns. And I want the group to actually use the inner block content width, which is okay, that's cool, that's fine. And in my color, my first column is going to have a cover block, which is going to be my image, which is here. So if I select that, okay, so I'm not seeing the 2 columns because of the way that the default breakpoints are set in this theme. But if we make some real estate by getting rid of the list view or the settings, we can see that we do have 2 columns in there. So again, with this image, I want to make the focal point lower because we're going to put in some text under here. But I also want to change the opacity back to 0. So I don't want the overlay. And what do I want to do? So in the columns block, I think I want to add in some margin at the top. Because these are units, we're going to use the same consistent units so that we can get this nice universal spacing around each of these blocks to frame the layout. So I'm going to use margin top. I'm going to use 2 or 3, I guess. We use number 2 as a unit, as a default unit. So in my second column, again, I want to add in another group, another column, cover block rather. So if I duplicate this one, I can just pull that into my second column. And again, we're going to have to get some real estate here to see what's going on. So first of all, I can see that we need some space in there. So how I'm going to address that is to select columns, and you can navigate through your blocks. So say you're nested, you've got your cover block, which is nested in the column, and then in the columns block, you can actually use the breadcrumb at the bottom of the page. So if you want to change the setting of something, you can come along here. If you've got an inner block selected, you can come along the breadcrumb here and select the parent element. So I want the columns, and I want to go down to the block spacing, and I want to set that to 2. Remember, the unit 2 is the same as the unit 2 that we use for the margin at the top. Now, in the second column, I want to select the column, not the columns, which is the parent. I want to select the column of the second column. And then I want to set the margin top to, which I don't have access to, which is interesting. So how am I going to do this? So maybe I have to do this on the cover. So if I select the cover, then I can come to margin, and I can select the top margin and set this to a custom setting, which is going to be minus 100 pixels, let's say. And then that's how we're going to break into this cover image at the top. If we look at the layout here, this is how we're going to create this effect here. So we just change this image, and it was a blue book, wasn't it? It was this one here. And I'll come back and do the text in a minute. Now, if we carry on and add another group or cover in underneath here, in fact, what you can do is just duplicate that. So you'll notice that you've got some keyboard shortcuts here. So Shift, Control, or Command D, and that allows you to duplicate elements. So if we get some real estate here, we will notice that we're missing the spacing, and that's because we've duplicated this block, we've also duplicated the negative margin. So I need to select that cover and global stars again. So annoying. So go to the settings of that cover block, come down to your margins, and you can come to the dimensions and reset the margins here. So now that column, I want to select the whole column block and then hopefully change block spacing, and again use unit 2, and that will give me that universal spacing. Now we'll notice that the next cover underneath here doesn't break out. So what we need to do is to take this top cover We can see it doesn't break out like this does. It's just kind of like a little bit narrower, a little bit smaller. So what we need to do is to take this cover block here and put it in a columns block. So what I'm going to do is after that, I'll add a columns block, and this will be 2 columns. So if I put that up there, now what I want to do is to take this cover and put it in the first column. So we've kind of got a columns block within a column, but the second column is just going to be used for an empty space. And that's how we're going to create that breakout we can see here. Now that's a bit too much, so we can go to the columns, which is the nested column. Actually, we want to select the first column in the columns block. We're going to set that to a width of percentage width of, I don't know, 80%. And then that's kind of like roughly where we're at. Now this cover is probably too big because it's kind of more square than it is portrait. So we can just squeeze that down a little bit. And again, I want to take the focal point of that image in the covers block to the bottom, and that will just push everything up, and then I can get my text in. So I'm going to come back and do the text later. So I'm going to change the image of that cover block to, what do we have? I think we have a green, orange book on green, which is that book there. We select that. And then what do we have? Okay, so we've got the same effect that we did on the second column here, but in reverse. So we can do that again quite simply. We go to our list view. So in our first column, we have a cover, and then we want to add after that a column block, and that's going to have 2 columns. And in the first column is going to be a space, and then in the second column we're going to have a cover. So I'm going to take that cover and duplicate that one, and then just drag that into the second column. And then I want to set that width, that column, to 80%. And that's going to give me the effect I want. And I'll change that image to, what do we have? Blue book on yellow. So I want to select that cover, replace the image with blue book on yellow, which is book there. Cool. So now if we look at the real estate here, we can see that we're getting that breakout effect again. But we need to change the block spacing of this columns, of the parent columns rather. So I'm going to go to the settings, not the global settings. And we've got block spacing top and bottom, but I need to add it. Sorry, we've got the block spacing left and right, but I need to add it top and bottom. And it's not actually affecting that. So why is it not doing that? So let's have a look. So I've got my parent block selected, maybe. So that's my columns. Do I need to do it in that block or that column? I think I need to do it in that column block. So go to the settings, block spacing 2. There we go. So if we get some real estate, there we go. So now because I've got so that's the second column. So yeah, it's the column I needed to set the block spacing of to get my uniform gap around everything. So that's looking good. And we do have another image under here. So this is our second column. So we've got our columns in here, then we've got a cover, and then we just have another cover in there. So that's easy enough to do. We can duplicate that cover, and that will take the same settings. I just need to replace that image with a blue on blue book, which is this one here. Select that. Okay, and then we have another cover underneath this block. So again, that's just a simple cover block in the first column. So for first column, I'm just going to duplicate that block, cover block, and move that underneath there. And that is going to be blue open book, which is that one there. Select. And then we have this call to action, I guess it is. Check out all our books. So I'm going to, that's an image. Okay. So to do that, we're going to select the last block in our second column. We're going to add another block after that, which is going to be a group block. Is it going to be a group block? No, I'm going to make it a cover block actually. The reason for that is not a code. Add after, and we'll try that again. And this is going to be a cover block. Now the reason for that is that I can change the color background but still retain the text and keep it centered. So what do we have? We have, I think we said, check out all our books. So I'm just going to put that in, out all our books. Simple enough. And that text is going to be white, and it's going to be bold and a little bit larger. So we save that. We close all these list views and settings, and it's actually over 2 lines. So we can either break it like that, or we can just simply add some padding in that group. Sorry, not in the group, the cover. You can add some padding in that, and that will just squeeze everything inside and then force the text to be over 2 lines. Now we'll notice here that we've got this breakout again. So we need to put 2 columns in that section there. So if we look at our list view, that is the cover block, which is the red background. That needs to be a columns. So I'm going to add after that one, columns block, and type columns. This is going to be 2 columns. I'm going to move that cover into the first column, and I'm going to set that to 80% width. So if we look at the real estate here, then we get this breakout, which is exactly what we want here. So that's looking good. All that I need to do now is to just create this generic text, copy from the main site there. I'm just going to paste that in. Now, because this is a cover block, I can align any content positioning to wherever I want using this icon here. So I'm going to put that to the bottom left. So this text needs to be white and it needs to be aligned to the left and probably a lot smaller than that. And then this needs to be, again, white, bold. I'm going to change the font to be sans serif and probably make it a little bit smaller than that. And we also need to change this text to white, and that is actually a button. So again, we can transform that block into a buttons block, and that needs to be red, the background. And then we can take that's actually a button again, and that is styled with an outline, and the color of that is white. And again, this text here is the small text. Again, it needs to be aligned to the left, and it needs to be white. So now I can take this whole bunch of text here, and what I'm actually going to do is to group it. So it's kind of contained in its own element, and then I can control all of the padding inside of that and block spacing as well. So you can select all of those blocks, and you can, on a Mac, you can press Command G, and that will actually group everything. Now, for some reason, that only groups things if you've got multiple blocks selected. You can't do them on a single block. If I do G, it doesn't do it because the browser pulls up my search tab. But if I were to select multiple blocks using Shift, I can then press Command G and it groups things. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's a bug that Core can fix. Anyway, so if I select my group, I can then go to the settings and take the block spacing and just space it out a little bit, and that's fine. Now I can take that group, that cover block, just make it a little bit deeper and get the focal point for the image, push it down to the bottom, and that will allow me to get that text just about where I want it. And I can move the focal point up slightly, make it square. Okay, so if I get some real estate here by removing some of we've probably got a little bit too much spacing in there, but let me address that by changing the focal point, that down a little bit. Okay, let's make it squarer. Okay, so maybe I won't use the block spacing, and I'll use some, interestingly, when you make it smaller, it does push. So if we save that, and let's have a look see what it looks like on the front end. Refresh the front end, kind of looks okay. I mean, am I going to get hung up on this spacing? Really, the premise of this video is to show you how to do complex layouts like this. If you want to go back and fiddle with all of this, you can, but I'm not too concerned over it. But if you did want to address it, you can just come to the group, maybe take the block spacing out, and then you can address all of these elements individually by going to the dimensions. And maybe if you want to use some margins, maybe I want to keep that where it is and just push the margin of the heading away, or push the button away from the heading. So I go to my dimensions, margins, margin bottom, and then I push that away by 2 maybe. And again, do the same thing on the button, to the settings, select margin bottom, push that away, and again on that button. This is what I wasn't going to do, but I'm doing it anyway. Where are we? So I want to select that button. Why can't that button? Welcome to the world of debugging in the block editor. Okay, there we go. So I can then select that style setting, go to dimensions. Okay, so I need to select the buttons rather than the button, and then go to margins bottom, space that away by 1, save that. Let's have a quick look in the editor itself. Go to the front end, refresh the page. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to get too hung up with the spacing. So what I can do now is, because this is the same kind of pattern effectively, I'm going to create a pattern, and I'm just going to drop that pattern into all of the other blocks. So you can do that quite easily by selecting the group, and then go to the 3 dots, and then create pattern, which is here. So I don't want this to be synced. If I choose synced, it's going to make all of the patterns the same. So if I change it in one area, it will ripple through all of the others. I don't want that to be synced because I want to be able to change the text. So I'm going to call this details. I'm going to add that, and then I can come to all of my other blocks. I can insert a pattern here, which is going to be called details, not to be confused with the core details. This is a pattern, and you can see that by the diamond that defines the pattern. So I'm going to add the details there, and I need to go to the cover and then align everything to the bottom, and that'll push everything down. So again, I can come here, add in the details again, details pattern, select the cover and align it to the bottom, and do the same thing for this one, details, and select the cover and align that to the bottom and do the same thing. And I wonder if I can just copy that. if I copy this, I can copy that group and I can just go to this block here and paste. And that will actually paste in, the group, not the actual pattern itself, which is fine. I'm okay with that. So I want to get rid of that text block there, select the cover and align it to the bottom. So this is all very tedious stuff really, but we get that in. And again, select the cover and align everything to the bottom. We don't actually need that block, get rid of that. And we don't need that one there either. And one there, don't have one there. Okay, cool. So if we save that and we go to the front end, refresh the page, and we're kind of looking like we're in a pretty good place. So that's my take on creating fairly complex layouts. Now, obviously I can spend more time on the contrast and the spacing of all of these elements because I don't think the contrast works very well, but kind of replicating what's already been built on this site. So I'm not going to get too hung up on that. So the other element I want to build is this call to action here. So we can do that quite easily. If we come down over to our list view, we can see that we've got our main layout, which is our breakout group of elements. And I want to add in another group block here. And this is going to be a cover block. And we don't need to add an image to this. I just want to give it a black background for now. I'm going to group that actually. So where's my cover's disappeared because I grouped that. So I'm going to add the cover back in again. I'm going to make that black. And I don't want the group to be, so I need to go to my settings and remove that black. So on the cover, I want that to be full width. So I need to go to my group. I need to uncheck the inner block uses content width, and that will make sure that everything goes to the full width of the browser or the device. So having my cover selected, I want to go to the background. And rather than the overlay be a color, I want to set it to a gradient. And the gradient is going to be, the first color is going to be white. So you can select that, and then we're going to add in another element. We're going to set that to black. And we want to do the same here, add another black color point, and then the final color point is going to be white. In fact, we're going to set that to transparent and do the same for the other one as well. So we've got the alpha transparency here. We set that to 0. And now all we need to do is to just squeeze these two elements together to create that hard edge. And we can do that by pulling the color points together. We'll see that it then hardens to a fine line. We do the same on this side, which is effectively the bottom. We get a hard edge there. So now I need to add an image into this block, into the cover block, which is this cutout image of this book. So we add that in. Now by doing that, the background color of our cover, depending on how we set the width of the color or the gradient, we can now create this effect where it breaks out of the cover block, which is quite a neat effect, in my opinion. So I actually want to make the image a lot smaller, and actually, because I need to add text to the right of this, I'm going to group this and make that group a column. So in fact, what I'll do is I'll add before, create a columns block. That'll be 2 columns. And then in the first column, I want to add the image. And in the second column, I'm going to add in a bunch of text, which is going to be that's an image. So I'll have to. So in my text, I want to put in discover the book. If I select all of that, it's white. Now, because the real estate is being squeezed here, so we kind of like the breakpoint's being hit and then everything's being stacked. To stop that from happening, you can select the columns and then you can uncheck stacked on mobile or stack on mobile, and that will force this to kind of like get squeezed into the width of the browser or the device it's being viewed on. Now, obviously that's been aligned to the top and I don't want that, so I want to select the columns and then make the alignment in the middle. Now we can see that we've got our image isn't breaking out of the cover. So we can either adjust the size of the image, or we can come to the covers block and change the setting of that gradient so that it's breaking out the image. Now, these sometimes can be a bit fiddly to work with, but if you persevere, it works quite well. So there you have it. We now have this call to action, and looks very similar to the way the main website looks. And we can add in more details in there if you want to. So in this cover, where this image is being placed, that columns block, I want to actually set that column to be less in terms of width. So I'm going to set the width of that to, 33%, and then that will bring that image, bring the text closer to the image, and I can then make that image slightly smaller, but still retain this breakout effect. In fact, what I want to do is to make that column width maybe 40%. Yeah, and then make that bigger, bolder, whatever. It's cool. So we save that, and then we go to the front end, refresh the page, and there we have it. We kind of have that Now I could spend a bit more time getting, setting the layout of that, but I'm going to leave it there for now. Am I going to build the footer? You know what? That's such a simple footer. I'm not going to even build that. But hopefully this video has displayed how easy it is to actually create these complex layouts in the block editor. So if you do one thing today, please do share this video to show others how easy it is to create these complex layouts using the block editor. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've got any comments, leave them in the comment section below. And as always, if you want more content like this, please do give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.